We're gonna talk about 3 rules for dealing with toxic people, so listen close, click like, click share, and of course hit the subscribe or follow button if you haven't already, all right? So here are my 3 rules for dealing with toxic people, because the reality is this: you cannot change them, but you can change you and how you deal with them so that you can have peace. So these rules are all about how you need to deal with you so that you can essentially be protected from all of their mess, all right? My first rule for dealing with toxic people is this: you need to set your boundaries by calling them out early and as often as needed, okay? So when you're dealing with someone who's toxic and clearly showing you that they have issues, you need to be willing to call them out early. Do not try to be nice. Do not try to be passive aggressive. Do not hope that they will get the hint, because they don't. They are this way because in some cases they may have a personality disorder which causes them to be this way, narcissism, borderline, whatever it may be, or in some cases they're just a jerk who throughout their life they've gotten worse and worse and worse, and this is just who they happen to be at this point in time. My point is this: they have been this way to many people before, so by you choosing not to call them out, you're not helping them and they're not going to change. What you're doing is teaching them that their behavior is acceptable to you, because toxic people view your silence as permission to keep doing the same thing. So my absolute first rule for dealing with toxic people is to call them out very clearly. And by calling them out, what I mean is this: you tell them, I don't like that. When they do something, you tell them very clearly, I didn't like that. I didn't like the way that made me feel. And if you continue doing that, I won't be able to come around anymore. If you keep on doing that, then this will happen. Tell them what you feel, and then tell them what the consequence will be by them continuing to do it. That way it's been made clear, so that if you do have to enforce that consequence at some point in time, the narrative can't be, well, they never told me and I was being a nice person, and the next thing I know, they just stopped answering my calls. It wasn't that. It was, I told you and I let you know what the consequence would be. So you've now empowered them to make an alternative choice if they would like to stay within your life, all right? So call them out early and often, and make sure that you let them know what the consequence is if they continue their behavior. My second rule for dealing with toxic people is do not get caught up in their drama by going back and forth with them. Because here's the thing: when you call them out and set a boundary, in a lot of cases, they're gonna wanna go back and forth. This is what they're accustomed to. They are used to toxicity. They are used to dysfunction. That's what they feel comfortable in. In some cases, they feel invigorated by that, because at the end of the day, they're toxic. They like the idea of arguing and everything like that. And you know the ones who like to argue the most? The ones who say, why you always wanna argue with me? They will create an argument with you and then turn around on you to make it seem like you started the argument and make it your fault. And you're like, what? You just caused the argument, now you blaming me? So my point is this: by going back and forth with them, you actually are taking your power away, because what you're doing is you are giving that power over to them, and now they can redefine the narrative. So let me say one of the most toxic things that people will do when you try to call them out and set a boundary. They will then say, why? Well, why? Or they'll go back and forth with you, or, well, how can you tell me to do this when you do the same thing? They try to, go back and forth to try to call you out as well. And then from there, of course, they're trying to rope you into an argument, so that when you start arguing with them, who argues perfectly? Who's going to be the best version of themselves in an argument? Probably no one, right? So then when you start going back and forth with them, if you raise your voice, if you do anything like this, you see, look at you, blah, 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 and then they can turn around on you, and now they can play victim. Toxic people don't like taking accountability, and the easiest way not to take accountability is to create an argument with you, and then when you make one little small slip up, or you come across in one way that they can try to use to redefine the narrative, they then turn it around on you. So when I tell you don't get caught up in their drama and argue with them, it really is a protective mechanism so that you can hold your power. You don't have to explain why you don't want them to treat you a certain way. You don't have to justify your boundaries. And the fact that they would want to go back and forth with you and argue with you is just a way for them to continue the toxicity so that they can play the victim. This is very common with narcissists. This is very common with people with borderline personality disorder. This is very common with people who are just all out. Okay? They want to redefine the narrative, so do not go back and forth with them, all right? My third tip for dealing with toxic people, and this is very, very serious, I'm gonna tell you, it's not always the easiest to do, but it's the most empowering thing you can do. You need to be willing to sever ties with them temporarily or permanently if ultimately you have set your boundaries and they have not changed. How many times are you willing to tell this person how you feel and they continue to do the same thing? How many times are you willing to set a boundary and they continue to ignore them, or for that matter, get worse? How many times are you willing to argue back and forth about stuff that is obviously wrong that they are doing? How much are you willing to do that? So at a certain point in time, you have to decide that having peace within your life is more important than having a relationship with this person, because this person has proven to you that peace is not their priority. This person has proven to you that they are content as they are. And they've also proven to you that dealing with them makes you a worse version of yourself. And so when you decide that you're going to cut this person off temporarily or permanently, it's not about punishing them. It's not about hurting them. It's about essentially saying, I don't like who I am and how I feel when I'm dealing with you. So with that understood, I'm going to cut you off. That's the conversation you have with yourself. So I'm going to tell you this right now. You don't need to have that conversation with them. Toxic people don't need your closure. You hear me when I say this? They don't need your closure. There is nothing you can tell them that is going to change them. So don't trick yourself into believing, if I tell them this one time that I'm done with them, that's going to convince him to act right. That's going to convince her to do this. It's not. They have been this way for a very long time. And more than likely, you are not the first or last person to cut them off and say, I can't deal with you right now. So with that understood, you need to not be looking for closure from them, nor should you believe that somehow or another threatening to leave them or giving them ultimatums is going to change them. People change for things that they desire. And if this person doesn't desire to be a better person, they're not going to change, regardless of what all the evidence is all around them that their behavior is causing destruction in their relationship with you or with other people. So when you decide that you are done with them, you need to be done with them. You need to block them if you need to block them. You need to cut off contact with them. If there are family members or friends that you know who talk to you about them all the time, tell them, I don't need to hear about that person, okay? Don't even talk to me about them. If there are other people who bring them around, then stop bringing that person around, okay? You need to make sure that you do everything within your power to separate yourself from that person so that you can get your healing. I'll tell you this right now, you are going to grieve, you are going to hurt, and you're going to, at some points in time when you have to cut off a toxic person, you're going to really start to question, could I have done something different? Was I wrong? Those are normal feelings. But I'll tell you what the healthy thing to do is continue to push forward and remember why you cut them off in the first place. So I'm gonna tell you a little trick that I do in order to help me whenever I have to cut off someone within my life who just clearly is not a healthy addition to my life. What I do is I take out my voice recorder from my cell phone, whatever it may be, and I record into it me explaining to myself why it is most healthy for me to cut this person off and temporarily or permanently in this relationship. I explain every bad thing that I experienced with this person. I explain to myself all the negative feelings that I felt. I go into it in detail. If I gotta scream, if I gotta yell, if I'm crying, I do that. The reason why is because anytime that I feel tempted to call that person back, return their text messages, or do anything to re-engage them, I can listen to that recording. Let me tell you one thing about toxic people. When you cut them off and they finally accept that they are cut off and they've now lost their supply, because in a lot of cases, they don't want you, they want what you give them. They want to use you. They want that emotional support. Or they just want the toxicity and all the fire that comes with being in disagreement with you. That's what they want. Once they realize that it's cut off, then in some cases, they will trick you by trying to, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I miss you. They weren't so sorry when they was doing the stuff. They didn't miss you or wasn't worried about missing you when you threatened to leave beforehand and you set the boundaries that they ignored. So then now they're gonna come back and act like they miss you and act like they're sorry. You need to have that recording that you can listen to remind yourself of why not to go back and why you shouldn't believe them. I'll tell you this right now, dealing with toxic people is something that none of us wanna deal with, and it's one of those unfortunate things that happen within life occasionally. But I'll tell you that once you are able to learn that there are ways that you can deal with toxic people and that you can set boundaries with them early, then what will happen is their ability to affect you, affect your life, and for that matter, even get attached to you will be so limited because as time goes along and you start to notice people's toxic traits and you set those boundaries early, more than likely those toxic people will depart from you and that relationship won't even move forward. So these steps I'm teaching you are not just how to deal with the toxic person that's in your life, it's also steps on how to prevent yourself from becoming attached to toxic people in the future. If this video was helpful for you, go ahead and click like and click share and comment below and let me know what are some of the things that you do within your life in order to deal with those toxic people so you can protect your own peace.